Yes guys, so this is the one of the most important video. This is one of the most important topic I'm gonna discuss, which is debunking pleasure in PMO, right? So this is gonna be an amazing video about debunking pleasure, because if not the biggest benefit, one of the biggest benefit that people see in PMO unconsciously is the pleasure, right? And once you debunk pleasure in PMO, you're not gonna feel like you want porn anymore. You're not gonna feel like you want to masturbate anymore. So it's the best video you're gonna ever watch today, okay? So make sure to listen with a very open mind and be very open to new thoughts and new perspective, okay? Because it will help you to see something that you never saw before, okay? Because, and no, it's this video is not gonna be like, oh, just stop thinking that there is no pleasure in porn and your brain will stop associating pleasure with it. No. It's not like that, okay? It's really gonna be way more in detailed video, okay? I'm gonna debunk pleasure. I'm not only gonna debunk pleasure linked to porn and masturbation, but also I'm gonna debunk pleasure in and of itself, okay? Because believe me, there are a lot of lies that people believe in regarding pleasure, and because they believe in it so strongly, so it becomes their reality. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So first of all, let's understand what. Let me be very quick, okay? And sorry, my camera is shaking a little bit, okay? Because I'm actually making this video quite like whenever I will erase this whiteboard, it's gonna shake a little bit, okay? So if you can compromise a little bit. So guys, if you have been watching my videos, if you have been watching my content on YouTube, by now you probably understood that what is porn, right? So porn is a lifeless video, right? And what is masturbation? And we're gonna go deep into masturbation as well. What is masturbation? Masturbation is a small physical stimulation. It's a small physical sensation, right? So now, if porn is the lifeless video, masturbation is a small physical stimulation, then what is actually pleasurable about either of those things, right? So you need to understand, like, masturbation, it's a small physical sensation, it's a small physical buzz, right? Just like, for example, if I were to touch, like, if you touch your arms, your hands, your nose or your face, do you feel pleasure? No. But if, let's say, you're getting a massage from someone, let's say a woman, okay, let's say a woman is massaging your body part just like that. Now, yeah, maybe now you get pleasure. Yeah, maybe now you will get pleasure. You see where I'm getting at? So is it how you're touching yourself, or you are touching your certain part of the body, or is it how you mentally interpret that physical sensation as in the moment being to be pleasurable, right? So we need to start questioning ourselves, okay? We need to start questioning ourselves. So masturbation is a small physical tingle, okay? Just like if you were to tingle your arms, your chest, your inner thighs, it kind of gives like a feeling of like, ooh. I don't know how to describe that feeling. So it's the exact same thing, okay? Masturbation is no different. What matters the most is your mental interpretation, right? So now let's talk about so let's first cover porn, okay? So what is actually pleasurable about a lifeless video? Now, what if you put a screen? This is a screen, right? What if you put a screen, this lifeless video, in front of the people who are living in the tribes? You know, those people who are living in the tribes that are not connected to the modern day society. What if you put this screen, this mobile, in front of those people living in the tribes, okay? And you just tell them, yo, guys, this is a lifeless video. Like, we should not even say the lifeless video, but yo guys, this is a screen, right? Do they gonna feel pleasure, right? I mean, what if let's say you put porn on the screen, okay, right, and you give it to the people living in the tribes? Do they gonna be like, oh my god, man, this gives a lot of pleasure, this gives a lot of dopamine, oh, I'm out of control, thank you so much for bringing this, we are very thankful to you. No, none of that would happen, okay? Even arousal won't happen, even shame would not happen, nothing would happen, okay? Because deep down they know that, bro, like, that's a lifeless video, right? They're not actually having sex, okay? This is a lifeless video. So uh, for example, let me give you another example, okay? Just like, for example, if I look at this whiteboard, right, if I look at it, am I gonna feel pleasure? No, because it's the exact same thing, okay? Like, this is a screen, and this whiteboard, it's the same thing, okay? Both are materials. This is a screen, this is the whiteboard, both are materials, the same thing, okay? Now if I look at this whiteboard, am I gonna feel pleasure? No, right? But if I give personal meaning to the whiteboard, if I say like, oh, this whiteboard, it helped me to create a lot of videos that's gonna change people's lives, and it's gonna help them to quit porn and masturbation forever, and it can and this whiteboard helped me to create a lot of projects that brought so much to my life, and it changed people's lives, and whenever I write on this whiteboard, I just love what I'm writing. So now what's gonna happen? I will get the pleasure not because of the whiteboard in and of itself, but how I give personal meaning to the whiteboard. You see, that's what actually is happening, okay? Because the thing is, I got the pleasure not because of this whiteboard, this lifeless material, right? But how I actually gave personal meaning to to this whiteboard, right? So you need to understand that the problem is not the bond, right? It's not this screen, okay? It's not the screen, it's how you perceive that lifeless video to give you pleasure. Be- bec- because you perceive it to be pleasurable, so it becomes pleasurable. It's a placebo, okay? And we are going to talk about placebo later on in this video as well, right? So you need to understand that it's not because of the porn in and of itself, it's because of how you actually perceive that video to be, okay? Yep. Now let's get to the main topic, okay? So the question comes is, if porn is a lifeless video, okay, then what is actually pleasurable about both of those things, okay? Like, what is actually pleasurable about porn and masturbation? So what is actually pleasurable about either of those things? That's so what is actually pleasurable is this. You see, this is what is actually pleasurable, okay? This is what actually feels good. It's your mental masturbation, it's your fantasy, right? So you need to understand, like, just like, for example, like, like, have you remembered the last time when you mindfully watched porn, right? Because think about it, when you watch porn, right, what is actually happening is, what actually happens is, you use your imagination, you use your imaginary you use your imagination to create a sense like, oh, you are the one actually in the video, right? You are the one doing those things in the video with someone else that you might know, right? Someone else you might want to have sex with, right? So that's what actually is happening, okay? And also with masturbation, it's the exact same thing, okay? Because think about it, people don't just masturbate without thinking, without fantasizing, okay? Like, they have to think, they have to fantasize about someone they know in the past they have sex with, or someone or something. They have to invent something in their mind, okay? Like, people cannot just masturbate out of nowhere without any thoughts, right? Like, they have to create something in their mind, okay? So that's what we call mental masturbation. It's your fantasy that actually feels good. It's not the lifeless video in and of itself, it's not the screen that gives you pleasure. What actually feels pleasurable is this, right? So and I mean, it's totally up to you, okay? And this is not something that is forced upon you, okay? It's you that creates that fantasy, okay? Right? So because thing so the thing so what actually happens is that it's not the video that turns you on, right? It's not the video that turns you on, it's how you imagine yourself doing the things in the video, right? Now you probably understood that. Now, like for example, now I am assuming many of you guys have already done this test as well, and if not, like you can actually do this test. So remember, now if you mindfully now if you mindfully now if you mindfully watch porn, right? Remember the last time when you mindfully watched porn, or even you can do this experiment, if you can do this test, and you can do this test if you don't want to do it, and if you want to do it, it's your choice, okay? But many of my students who have done this test, they experience that when they mindfully watch porn, mindful means a state when you're not basically thinking of anything, okay? Like you're not having any thoughts in your mind, and it's kind of like a meditative state, you can say, where you are just thinking of something else, like not something else, but I mean, you are not just having any thoughts in your mind, okay? It's like a kind of meditative state, you can say. So when you mindfully watch it, right? When you become mindful, like zone out and just mindfully watch it, my students experience, they have done this test, they experience that literally there's no arousals, they don't get any arousals, there's literally nothing happens, okay? Like they don't get any arousals, they don't get any urges, literally nothing happens to their dick, okay? Like there's literally zero arousals, zero temptations, zero urges, okay? They don't feel like they are turned on, nothing that happens, okay? So what it shows, that because their mind is not activated, so they don't feel all of those things, they don't feel what NoFap tells you to feel regarding porn, right? They don't feel any of those things. So that's another thing to understand, okay? So what actually is pleasurable is this, it's your mental interpretation, it's your mental masturbation, okay? Because if you mindfully watch porn, you will see that nothing happens, okay? Literally there are zero arousals, zero urges, literally nothing that happens, okay? So just like for example, if I just look at this whiteboard mindfully, just like this whiteboard, okay, it's the exact same thing. If I look at this whiteboard mindfully, right, literally nothing that happens, okay? I won't feel anything, right? But if I start thinking about the whiteboard, if I start giving it personal meaning, that oh, this whiteboard, it helped me to create a lot of projects, a lot of videos that's gonna change people's mindset, and it's gonna help them to break free from PMO effortlessly, and all of those things. So now I'm gonna feel the pleasure, okay? Like now I will get the pleasure from even seeing the whiteboard, right? So what is actually pleasurable, you might understand, right? Now let's just get to another point, okay? Now if this is like one of another example I can give you. Random kid, okay? Now what if, like for example, I mean, you can also see the example from your past as well. So what if you force now if you force a random kid to watch porn, right? Now what if you force a random kid to watch porn, who doesn't even, if let's say that kid doesn't even knows about porn or masturbation, he doesn't even know if it's good or bad, he doesn't even knows the benefits, he doesn't even knows the negatives, right? Now so what if you force him, let's say you put porn in front of him and you force him to watch it, like he won't feel anything, right? He wouldn't even feel any pleasure, he wouldn't feel arousals, he would not be like, oh my god man, I'm feeling so good, it gives me a lot of pleasure, it gives me a lot of dopamine, thank you so much for showing me this. No, right? He might feel weird, he might feel disgusting about it, he might be like, man, what the hell is this, right? What the heck is this, right? So, and also that kid doesn't even have any like that kid doesn't even have any beliefs of NoFap, right? It doesn't have like that kid doesn't even have any beliefs of NoFap, like oh, you are addicted if you watch it once, and you're gonna become addicted, and it's gonna be hard because your brain is rewired differently, and it gives you so much pleasure and dopamine. None of that, okay? That kid is clear of all those beliefs, okay? So what's gonna happen? Okay, he won't feel anything. He won't feel any pleasure, he won't feel any arousals, he won't feel anything, right? Instead, he might feel weird and disgusting about it, right? You see? So you need to understand. And also, like, that kid doesn't have any beliefs about it, okay? Like, that kid doesn't even believe that, oh, this video, when he's gonna watch it, it's like he's actually having sex, okay? It doesn't have any of those beliefs, okay? So what's gonna happen? That kid doesn't even feel like he's gonna turn on, right? And also, I'm gonna give you another example, okay? Like, your own personal example, because I'm assuming most of you guys have experienced this a lot of times as well. Now, if you remember the first time, now if you remember the first time Now, if you remember the first time when you actually watched porn, like, remember the first time when you watched porn, you really didn't feel anything, right? You really didn't feel any pleasure, you really didn't feel any arousal, nothing, right? I mean, yeah, you were actually curious about it. Yeah, there was actually curiosity in your mind. You were like, oh, let me gonna explore something, right? But you didn't feel any pleasure, right? You actually felt weird about it. So what it shows, but what happened is, as time went on, you went on these porn sites, and you got this message from this marketing inside of these porn sites that, oh, porn is so pleasurable when you are lonely, and it gives you a lot of pleasure, and it gives you the sexual relief when you are lonely, it gives you a lot of dopamine, a lot of pleasure, and all of those things, okay? So what happened, once you got that message in your mind, it became your belief. And remember, we humans always act according to our beliefs. Our beliefs becomes our reality, right? So what actually happened is, you started feeling that pleasure, you started getting that pleasure, not because of porn in and of itself, but because of placebo, okay? And we're going to talk about placebo as well in the video. Don't worry about that, you're going to understand everything, okay? So you need to understand that the pleasure in PMO, porn, masturbation, and orgasm, the pleasure in PMO is not because of PMO in and of itself, but because of your mental masturbation. It's because of your mental fantasy and your mindset, okay? It's not because of these things, okay? Because think about it, porn is a lifeless video. It's a screen with pixels. It's just the same thing, just like this whiteboard, okay? Both are same things, like both are, like, there is no difference, right? Both are materials. And masturbation is a small physical stimulation, just like if I touch my arm, if I touch my hands, right? It's the exact same thing, right? It's no different than that. So let me show you another study, okay, to actually prove this further for you. So there is another study, actually took this research from a book. So there's another study in which I call this opiates study. Opiates study. So I'm pretty sure that most of you guys might know about opiates, right? It's a drug, basically. So in this study, what actually happened is, they gave this drug, opiates, to 150 young males. 150 young males. And the results were extremely shocking. What happened is, they gave this drug, opiates, to 150 young males, and out of those 150 young males, only 3 of them wanted to repeat the experience. Only 3 of them wanted to repeat the experience, right? So what it actually shows, that if pleasure what it actually shows, that pleasure is not inside of the these material things. Pleasure is not inside of the drugs. But because think about it, if pleasure was inside of the drugs, if pleasure was inside of the opiates, right, then one out of those 150 young males, only 3 of them wanted to repeat the experience. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because think about it, if pleasure was inside of the opiates, if pleasure was inside of these material things, if pleasure was inside of the drugs, then if it was given to 150 young males, then all of them, nearly all of them, would want to repeat the experience. Because bro, like there's a pleasure, there's a lot of pleasure in it, which people say, right? So like they actually, all of them would want to repeat the experience, because bro, there's a lot of pleasure that they are getting out of it. But what actually happened is, the study showed that those 150 young males, they didn't actually find it pleasurable. They were forced to take the opiates. They didn't find it pleasurable. They literally find it weird and disgusting, right? They didn't got any pleasure from it, whilst only 3 of them wanted to repeat the experience, right? So what it shows, that pleasure is not what we think it is. Pleasure comes from your own mind, right? If you perceive something to be pleasurable, it becomes pleasurable, right? So this study clearly shows that these guys didn't perceive opiates to give them pleasure, so they didn't got the pleasure from the opiates, right? It's really that simple, okay? And only out of those 150 young males, only 3 of them wanted to repeat the experience, right? And also one of the most craziest part is that this drug opiates, you can actually search about it, it's considered extremely addictive. Whilst think about it, this opiates drug is considered severely addicted, right? It's so people say that it's so much addictive, but in this study, when it was given to 150 young males, only 3 of them wanted to repeat the experience, right? And this one study can help you understand a lot of things, right? So I'm actually explaining points quickly, because we have not enough time left, right? So we need to be quick, you know. And guys, be very open to new thoughts and new perspective, because the goal of this video is not to just tell you, oh, porn is not pleasurable, but to actually give you points, so that you can actually come to that conclusion at your own, right? Oh yeah, maybe porn is not pleasurable, okay? So it should come from inside of you. And how once you understand, once you realize, you know, once you take that information and you do your own reasoning, you will become convinced, right? And that's what actually we want. Because once you're going to become convinced of it, you're going to actually become free, right? It's really that simple. Is that so? Another argument that people make, a lot of people make, is that, oh, because porn is all about, you know, reproduction, because porn is all about reproduction, and you know, you are actually seeing people having sex, and you know, it's all about reproducing with a female, and you know, you are seeing you know, thousands of naked women. It's all about reproduction, so that's why it's pleasurable, right? And also a lot of people claim that, oh, because it's all about reproduction, and reproduction is linked to the survival, right? So that's why it's pleasurable. Alright, so you need to understand that reproduction is not linked to any survival needs, okay? I mean, yeah, it helps with the survival, but it's not actually the survival need, okay? And because think about it, reproduction is just, it's not like a survival need. Reproduction is not just like hunger, it's not like a food, it's not like water, it's none of that, okay? Because people can live without reproduction, but they cannot live without food, they cannot live without drinking water, right? Because that's something that is linked to the survival, right? You cannot actually live without eating food, you cannot live without drinking water, right? That's a survival need. But reproduction is not linked to any survival needs at all, okay? Just like, for example, I mean, there are a lot of guys, a lot of people in this world, they go all their life without having sex, right? Just like, for example, priests and asexuals, right? These guys never indulge in any sexual activity for like their whole life, right? Priests never have priests never engage in any sexual activity for their whole life, because it's against their moral values, right? And also asexuals, they never even have sex at all. So does that mean that these people die? No, they survive, right? They can survive. I mean, they have testosterone. They have. It's not about they don't have testosterone and libido and masculinity. No, no, they all have testosterone. They all have libido. They all have masculinity. But what is the difference is that they actually they just choose, right? They don't want to do. They don't want that, right? And because they don't want that, they simply make a choice. They choose to not do it, right? For like their whole life. So does that mean that these people die? No, right? So that shows that reproduction is not linked to any survival needs, right? And because it's not linked to any survival needs, right, so it's not related to this is all about reproduction. Okay, now also people claim, a lot of people make an argument that, oh, because porn is all about reproduction, because porn is all about reproduction, and you're reproducing with a lot of females, so that's why it's pleasurable, right? All right, so all right, so what if you watch a video now what if you watch a video of people eating food, then would you gonna satisfy your own hunger? Like for example, if let's say you are feeling extremely hungry, okay, let's say you are very hungry, right, and you are craving for food, then in that moment, if someone give you a video of people eating, let's say a cow, for example, that does that mean that you are actually gonna feel like you are eating the cow? Does that mean that you are actually eating the cow? No, right? Now if you watch a video of people eating food, right, if you watch a video of people eating a cow, you're not gonna actually eat the cow, you're not actually eating the cow, right? You're not gonna satisfy your own hunger. And even if you watch thousands of videos about people eating cows, thousands of videos about food, you're not gonna satisfy your own hunger, right? You're not actually eating those things, right? It's just a video. You see where I'm getting at, right? So you need to understand that uh, porn is not about sex at all, okay? Like it's not about sexual needs, it's not about reproduction, right? It's the pleasure is not what we think it is, okay? Pleasure is not because of reproduction, because we already debunked reproduction as well, that it's not linked to any survival needs at all, right? Because there are a lot of people just like priests and asexuals, they go all their life without having sex, and yet they still survive, right? They simply choose to, right? Now if you watch a video of people eating food, you're not gonna satisfy your own hunger, you're not actually eating that food, right? It's really that simple. Now let me give you another interesting study to really debunk this even more. So music, right? So it has been proven through studies that music gives the same high, it gives the same pleasure, just like the drugs, right? And I can show you the studies if you want. Yet music is not linked to any survival needs at all. Music is not linked to any survival needs at all, right? Yet music still gives the same high and same pleasure. It gives a lot of pleasure, it gives a lot of that feeling, a lot of highs. Yet music is not linked to any survival needs at all, right? And also like it's not that music is inherently pleasurable or fun, no. Like for example, different people have their own taste of music, different people have their own preferences of music, right? Like for example, one guy might get a lot of pleasure from listening to hip hop music, whilst any other guy might get a lot of pleasure from listening to Korean music, and he might get no pleasure from listening to hip hop music. It's really that simple, okay? Just like I can give you my own personal example, okay? Like I have quit music, by the way, but previously when I used to listen to music, I was listening a lot of hip hop music. You know, in the beginning, I was listening to a lot of hip hop music, but then as time went on, my preference changed, right? Like I shifted from listening to hip hop music from to listening to more like a, instrumental music, right? So my preference changed. So is the music changed, or it's me that's changed, right? So you need to understand that, okay? So it's a really interesting study. All right. All right, so let me give you uh, another example, okay? Let me give you another example to really debunk this even more. So you need to understand that uh, so this is another interesting and amazing example I can give you. So a lot of in a lot of countries, in western countries, I don't know in Pakistan, but I know that in most of the western countries there are a lot of girls who cut their arms, who cut their body parts, who cut their arms, and it gives them a lot of pleasure, right? They literally feel a lot of stress relief, and it gives them a lot of pleasure when they cut their own body parts, when they cut their arms, and for them it's so much pleasurable. For them it's so much, it feels so much good for them. But I want to ask you, does cutting your arms, do you think cutting your arms is objectively pleasurable? No. I mean, I mean, we don't get pleasure from cutting our own body parts. I mean, objectively, it's not pleasurable at all, right? Whilst there are a lot of girls in Western countries, and most of the countries, a lot of girls actually do this. They cut their body parts, they cut their own arms, and for them, it's so much pleasurable. For them, it gives them a lot of pleasure, a lot of stress relief, you know, a lot of loneliness relief, whatever, right? So what it shows, that pleasure comes from your own mind. It's not the thing that is pleasurable in and of itself, but how you perceive that activity or that thing to give you pleasure, right? It's pleasure comes from your own mind, right? It's you that perceive that activity to be pleasurable, right? Pleasure comes from your own mind, and it's not because of that thing in and of itself. So it's really that simple, okay? So you need to understand that our enjoyment is massively affected by our beliefs, right? Our enjoyment is massively affected by our beliefs, right? Just like, for example, I can enjoy watching a horror movie, whilst my friend sitting next to me, he might not enjoy watching the same movie as me, right? So our enjoyment is massively affected by our beliefs. It's not the thing that is pleasurable in and of itself, but how we perceive it to give us pleasure, how we associate personal meaning with that thing. It's really that simple, okay? So now let me give you another very simple example, okay? So the reason why I say that porn does not give pleasure is because it does not deliver. Like, let's say, for example, let's say you eat a fruit. Let's say you eat mango, for example, okay? Regardless of the situation, regardless of if you want to eat a mango or not, regardless of if you are being forced to eat a mango, regardless of how you perceive the mango to be, you're still gonna get all the nutrients from that mango, right? I mean, you're still gonna get vitamin C, you're still gonna get like whatever nutrients you eat, whatever nutrients you get from the mango, you're still gonna get all those nutrients when you eat that fruit, when you eat that mango, right? And even if someone forcefully fed that fruit inside your mouth, guess what? Your body is still gonna get all the nutrients from it. Your body is still gonna get vitamin C, your body is still gonna get all of those nutrients, right? Why? Because the fruit, the mango in and of itself contains those nutrients inside of it, right? but but porn, in case of porn, the reason why I say that porn does not give you pleasure is because it does not deliver pleasure uh, uh, when you feel on top of the world, right? Like, like, imagine when you feel on top of the world, right? When you feel extremely happy, those moments when you don't even think about porn, basically, you're feeling extremely happy, everything is going well in your life. Now in that moment, if someone forced you to watch porn, if, let's say, someone put the screen in front of you, put a porn in front of you, and he forces you to watch it when you don't even want to watch it, do you gonna feel pleasure? No, right? You want. So what it shows that you're not gonna feel pleasure if you don't want to watch porn. You're not gonna feel pleasure, right? If you don't want pleasure in porn, you're not gonna feel pleasure. If you're not gonna feel like you want to watch porn, you're not gonna feel pleasure. It's really that simple, okay? Because think about it. If porn was to give you, if porn was to deliver pleasure, if porn was to deliver pleasure at any time, just like a fruit delivers nutrients every time you eat it, then it would be delivered at literally any time, right? Anytime, even when you want to watch it, even when you don't want to watch it, it should be delivered at any time, right? Just like, for example, if porn was to deliver if porn was to give you pleasure at any time, just like a fruit delivers nutrients, then that kid, I have given you that, then that kid would also feel the same pleasure, right? That kid would also get pleasure even if you don't want to watch that stuff, right? It's really that simple, okay? Let me give you another interesting example, okay? So this is one of the another amazing example that I can give you is the homosexual porn, right? Now I'm assuming that most of you guys were watching this video. Most of you guys, okay, like most of you guys, you do not feel any pleasure watching homosexual porn, gay porn, right? You don't like, you don't watch homosexual porn, right? I'm assuming that. So I mean, if porn would give you pleasure no matter what, if porn would give you dopamine no matter what, then you would also get pleasure when you watch homosexual porn, right? Because just like, for example, if porn was to give you pleasure, just like a fruit delivers nutrients, then you would also get the pleasure when you watch homosexual porn, right? The pleasure would also be delivered when you watch homosexual porn, because it's the exact same thing, okay? Or like, think of it, or like, think of like a very weird genre of porn that you find disgusting to watch, right? And if you watch that genre of porn, if you watch homosexual porn, you're not gonna get any pleasure. You're not gonna be you're not gonna feel like you are turned on. You're not gonna get any arousals. Literally nothing would happen, okay? You're not gonna feel anything, right? Yet it's the exact same thing, right? It's porn, right? Whilst someone else might get a lot of pleasure, a lot of dopamine watching the same stuff, watching homosexual porn, and whilst you don't feel anything. You see, it's all about your perception, right? Because you don't perceive homosexual porn to give you pleasure, so you do not get any pleasure from watching it, right? You perceive that homosexual porn to be disgusting, and you don't see any value in it, and that's why you do not get any pleasure from it. Whilst someone else might get a lot of pleasure, a lot of dopamine from watching homosexual porn, right? Because his perception is different, right? He perceives it to give him pleasure, so he gets the pleasure, right? It's really that simple, okay? You need to understand that. So now one of the most important topic of the video is placebo, okay? Because once you understand this, you're gonna understand, you know, deeply about why you actually feel that pleasure, okay? So we are gonna talk about the placebo effect. Now what is the placebo effect, right? What is actually placebo? So you can actually go and search about it on the internet to even understand more about it, but because the video is gonna be way too much longer, so I'm gonna be really quick, okay? I'm gonna give you a quick example to, you know, explain what placebo actually is, okay? So there was a study done to check whether placebo is, you know, how strong placebo is. So in that study there were two participants, there were two people who were having a really strong headache. They were having a really strong pain in their mind, in their head, right? So what actually happened is, for those two people, doctors created two pills for them, right? So one pill was the real one, which contained all the substances that is beneficial for curing the headache, right? And, you know, relieving their pain, whilst the other pill was the fake one, meaning that that pill didn't contain any substance inside it. It only contained sugar in it, that's it, right? So one pill was the real one, which contained all the substances that are beneficial for curing the headache, whilst the other pill was the fake one, right? Like, it didn't contain anything, it just contained sugar in it, that's it. So what happened is, both of those people, both of those guys, both of those participants were told that these two pills are created for them specifically to cure their headache and to make them feel better, right? So what happened is, the results were extremely shocking, right? The results showed that both of those guys were able to relieve their pain, relieve their headache at almost the same level. Crazy, right? So even though one pill was the fake one, it didn't contain anything inside it, but because that guy perceived that pill to give him stress relief, pain relief, you know, relieve his headache, so he felt that, you know, so he relieved his headache, not because of that pill in and of itself, not because of that pill, but because of his own mind, right? Because of this effect, because of the placebo, right? This is what we call the placebo effect, and it's so strong, it's so strong that, right, a simple like a scientific explanation for this is that our mind is so strong that it can create realistic physical scenarios in our body, right? Because of the placebo. Because once you understand the placebo effect, you're going to understand pleasure, you're going to understand why you feel the stress relief and everything, okay? So pleasure comes from the placebo, it does not comes from the pill, like whatever, okay? So let me give you another example, okay? Another quick example, okay? Yeah, so let me give you another quick study. So if someone if let's say someone walks up on you, let's say you're in the middle of watching porn, okay? If let's say someone walks up on you, if let's say you're in the middle of watching porn, you're in the middle of that session, right? And suddenly someone walks up on you, let's say your mother, your father, or your family member, and suddenly someone walks up on you. If let's say you're in the middle of that court session, do you still gonna feel the same pleasure? Do you still gonna feel the same effect, whatever? No, right? I mean, you're gonna shut down your laptop, you're gonna shut down your phone, you're gonna, you know, you're gonna be, you're not gonna focus on that screen anymore, you're not gonna feel any pleasure, you're not gonna feel any stress relief, you're not gonna feel anything, right? You see, you need to start questioning yourself. So I'm actually looking at my notes because I don't want to miss anything in this video. I want to explain each and everything clearly to you, okay? So let me show you another interesting study, and this is the study of a candy. Okay, the candy study, and this is another interesting study, and this study is going to help you to actually understand that pleasure is not what we think it is. Okay, pleasure is not what we think it is. So what happened is, you know like what actually happened is, there was a tribe who was given the candies, right? There was candies, they gave candies to a tribe, right? And that tribe obviously didn't even consume candies for like their whole life, and they didn't even have this marketing from the candies industries that, oh, it's so pleasurable, and it gives a lot of pleasure and all of those things. They didn't even have this marketing from the candies industries, and they didn't even consume candies for like their whole life, right? So what happened is, in that study they actually gave the candies to the tribe, and as we all know that the candy contains a lot of sugar in it, right? And sugar is somehow linked to the survival, right? I mean, of course, our body needs sugar and fats in order to survive, and it's something that is needed inside our body. But porn is literally like not needed inside. Like porn is literally like not needed, but sugar is something that we actually need in order to survive, right? So sugar is linked to the survival. So guess what? That is, in the study showed that those people living in the tribes, when they actually consumed the candies, they didn't even feel any pleasure from eating it. Instead they actually felt weird and disgusting, right? That study showed that these guys, the people living in the tribes, the candy didn't give them pleasure, right? Like it didn't felt good for them. They actually find it weird, they actually find it disgusting. They didn't find it taste good and give them pleasure, none of that, right? Yet it still contained a lot of sugar, which people say that it's linked to survival, which it is. Yet uh, it didn't give them any pleasure, right? Whilst if we take a look at ourselves, when we eat a candy, it gives us a lot of pleasure, because it contains sugar, and people say that because it contains sugar, so it gives a lot of pleasure, right? So now you understand that pleasure is not inside of the material things, right? But rather pleasure comes from your own mind, right? Guess what? These tribes didn't have any beliefs about candies, that, oh, it gives a lot of pleasure, and didn't have any beliefs about sugar as well, right? Especially in the case of candies. So because they didn't have any beliefs about it, so they didn't get pleasure, right? So because pleasure comes from your own mind, pleasure is not what we think it is, right? And guess what? These tribes also consume the belly of an animal, which we believe is the most disgusting thing on earth, right? I mean, belly of an animal which contains gas in it, and we believe that it's the most disgusting thing on earth. Yet for these people living in, for these tribes, it's so much pleasurable. I mean, it actually tastes good, right? The belly of an, for these tribes, they actually find it pleasurable to eat the belly of an animal. And guess what? These tribes also eat the liver of an animal, which most humans don't even eat nowadays. But for them, it gives them a lot of pleasure. For them, it's so much, it tastes so much good. For them, it gives them a lot of pleasure, a lot of all of those things, right? So you see, pleasure is not what we think it is. So it's an amazing and interesting study that I can show you. And guess what? I can eat something that is so much sugary, that contains a lot of sugar inside it, and I can find it disgusting, right? I might not get any pleasure from it, while someone else might eat the same exact thing, and he might feel a lot of pleasure from eating it. You see, it's really that simple. Okay, so pleasure comes from your own mind. It's not inside of the material things. Pleasure is not what we think it is, right? And let me give you another interesting example, okay, which is the wine study of a wine. Okay, And this is an amazing example, okay? So in this study, what actually happened is, uh, they actually took an expensive bottle of a wine. They actually took an expensive wine bottle, and of course, that was just a bottle. It didn't contain that expensive wine in it, but they only took an expensive wine bottle, and inside that expensive wine bottle they put a cheap wine, a cheap version of the wine, okay? So what happened is, they actually took an expensive bottle of a wine, they actually took an expensive bottle of a wine, and in that expensive bottle they put the cheap version of the wine. And guess what the study showed? When they gave that wine to the people, when they served that wine to the people, guess what? Those guys, those people felt way more pleasure from drinking that wine. They felt a lot of pleasure from drinking that wine, even though that was just an expensive bottle of a wine, and inside of that expensive bottle they put the cheap wine, which people have already which people already drink before, and they actually find it weird and disgusting. So they didn't like that cheap wine, right? But because that cheap wine was inside of that expensive labeled bottle, what happened? They felt way more pleasure drinking that wine, even though that was actually the cheap wine, right? But it was actually inside of that expensive bottle. So what it shows, that because that bottle has had that expensive label, the label of an expensive company, the biggest company, and it gave them the feeling of the luxurious feeling. So what happened? They perceived that bottle to be that luxurious, and and because they saw the label on that bottle, so they perceived that they are actually drinking that expensive wine. But in reality, in that expensive bottle of a wine, they put the cheap wine, and they felt the same pleasure from drinking and they felt the exact same pleasure from drinking that wine. You see, pleasure is not what we think it is. Pleasure comes from your own mind. It's not inside of the material things. This is one of the most crazy study, okay? Uh, so like, if you understand this, you're gonna understand that pleasure is not what we think it is, okay? So they felt a lot of pleasure from drinking that wine, the same exact wine which they drank previously, and they didn't really like it because it was cheap wine. But as they put that cheap wine in the expensive bottle, expensive wine bottle, they felt the same pleasure. They felt a lot of pleasure from drinking that wine, right? Why? Because of their own perception about it, right? Because they perceived that wine bottle to be that expensive bottle, right? So you need to understand that pleasure is not what we think it is, right? Let me give you another example, okay? So if pleasure if food was to give you pleasure and dopamine no matter what, then, like, bro, we would never stop eating food. We would be, because I mean, it gives us a lot of pleasure, it gives us a lot of dopamine, and we would never stop eating it. We would crave for even more food. But that's not what actually happens, right? We eat food, and the moment we satisfy our desire, we stop right there, okay? You see, just like, for example, you watch porn. Some of you guys might watch porn 2 or 3 times a day, and then you decide to stop, and then you stop, right? And then you don't get any more pleasure from it. While someone else might watch it 7 or 8 times or 6 or 7 times, and he might get even more pleasure than you, and he might keep getting pleasure the more he watch it. You see, that's what actually is happening, okay? But that's not what actually happens. The moment you actually satisfy, you just stop right there. So pleasure is not what we think it is, okay? Pleasure is not inside of the material things. You perceive porn to be pleasurable, so it becomes pleasurable. Pleasure comes from your own mind. It's all about your perception, right? It's really that simple. So guys, and also let me give you some more examples to make you more convinced about it. So let's say, for example, you're sitting at your office, like you're sitting down, and suddenly someone walks upon you and gives you an orgasm. I mean, yeah, it sounds a bit weird, and it sounds a bit weird, but just to just to give you an example, just to make you understand, what if someone walks upon you and gives you an orgasm, and if let's say he's a man, right? Do you gonna get pleasure? No, right? You're gonna feel weird and disgusting about it. You're not gonna get any pleasure from it, right? While someone else might get a lot of pleasure if he's homosexual, like whatever. Okay. And just like, for example, let's say you are having sex, okay, and suddenly you get to know that the woman, the person that you are actually having sex with, that's not a woman, that's actually a transgender. Then like, do you think that you're still gonna feel like you are pulled in? You're like, you're still gonna think that you're gonna feel the same pleasure? You're gonna feel like you're pulled in? No, because of your biology, because of the biological pleasure? No, right? You're gonna stop, you're gonna feel disgusting about it. It's really that simple, okay? It's all about your perception. It's all about your perception. That's it, okay? Guys, there is another biggest myth in the NoFap community, that if you have been watching porn for years, then you're not gonna feel you're not gonna feel pleasure after you quit porn. After you quit porn. So this is one of the most biggest lie, the biggest myth in the NoFap industry, in the NoFap space, that if you have been watching porn for years, then you're not gonna feel pleasure after you quit porn. This is the biggest lie, the biggest myth that floats around the NoFap space, and it's not like that, okay? Like, we already debunked pleasure in and of itself, right? We already gave you examples what is actually happening, what pleasure actually is, right? So this is one of the most biggest myth, okay? Don't believe in this lie that you're not gonna feel pleasure after you quit PMO, right? I mean, you're gonna still feel the same, you're gonna even feel more pleasure without the life without PMO. So don't believe in this lie, don't believe in this myth, okay, that you're not gonna feel pleasure after you quit PMO, right? So guys, if you have understood, if this video helped you, just leave a like, leave a comment down below, and share this video as much as possible, so actually more guys can become free, right? We need to spread truth as much as possible. And if you guys want to make this process even more easier, debunk each and every single benefit, click the link in the description down below. And take care for now. Assalamu alaikum.